She was born in a small town where people believed that a family was only complete when it had sons. From the time she was a child, she learned to stay quiet and helpful. She watched her brothers get praised for small things, while she was expected to work without complaint. No one said it out loud, but she always felt it. She was less important. Still, she grew up kind and hopeful, believing that marriage might change her fate. When she got married, she tried hard to be the perfect wife. She woke up early, cooked meals, cleaned the house, and followed every rule of her new home. At first, everyone seemed polite, but slowly, the pressure began. Questions came every day. When would she give good news? When would she make the family proud? The word son was said again and again, as if it was the only thing that mattered. Months passed and she became pregnant. She felt both joy and fear. Joy because a new life was growing inside her. Fear because she knew what everyone expected from her. During doctor visits, she was not allowed to ask questions. No one asked how she felt. All that mattered was the result. She prayed quietly every night, not for a son or a daughter, but for acceptance. As her belly grew, the family's mood changed. They brought charms, made wishes, and whispered hopes that the baby would be a boy. Sometimes she heard them talking behind her back, blaming her already, just in case things did not go their way. She stayed silent, rubbing her stomach, telling the baby stories of kindness and warmth, hoping the child could not feel the tension around them. The day of the birth came late at night. She was taken to a hospital in a rush. The pain was strong, but she did not cry out much. She had learned long ago that showing pain only brought trouble. After long hours, she heard a small cry. A nurse placed the baby in her arms. It was a girl. The baby was tiny, warm, and perfect. For a brief moment, nothing else mattered. But that moment did not last long. The room went quiet. Faces turned cold. No one smiled. No one congratulated her. She searched their eyes, hoping to see love or relief, but found only disappointment. Someone walked out of the room without a word. Another shook their head slowly. She held her daughter closer, confused and scared. She was weak after the birth, her body shaking, her heart heavy. She thought maybe time would soften them. Maybe once they saw the baby smile, everything would be fine. But the opposite happened. When she returned home, the house felt strange. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. Meals were silent. No one helped her with the baby. If the child cried, she was blamed. Whispers turned into harsh words. They said she had ruined their name. They said she was unlucky. They said a daughter was a burden they did not ask for. She tried to explain that she had no control over it, but no one listened. Each word felt like a stone on her chest. One evening, while she was still healing, the anger exploded. She was told that she was no longer welcome. She begged them to let her stay until she was stronger. She begged them to think about the baby. Her voice was shaking, her knees weak. But their decision was already made. They handed her a small bag with a few clothes. Nothing for the baby. No money. No plan. Just an order to leave. The door was opened, and the night air rushed in. She stepped outside, holding her newborn tightly, tears falling without sound. The door closed behind her with a final noise that echoed in her heart. She stood there for a long time, unsure where to go. The streets were quiet. Lights flickered in distant houses where families slept peacefully. She felt invisible, like the world had erased her in one night. Her baby moved softly in her arms, unaware of what had happened. She walked slowly, each step painful. Her body hurt. Her mind was numb, but she kept moving. She did not know where she would sleep or how she would eat the next day. All she knew was that she could not let her child feel unwanted, even if the whole world had turned its back on them. As the night grew colder, she found a place to sit and rest. She wrapped the baby as tightly as she could, whispering soft words to calm her. In that quiet moment, fear mixed with a strange strength. She had lost her home, her respect, her place in that family, but she still had her daughter, and without knowing it yet. That baby girl would become the reason she survived everything that was about to come. The night she was thrown out felt endless. The streets were quiet, but her mind was loud with fear. She walked slowly, stopping often because her body was still weak from childbirth. Every step hurt, yet she kept going because standing still felt even more frightening. The baby slept against her chest, small breaths rising and falling. Unaware that her whole world had changed in a single moment, she reached a bus stop and sat down on the cold bench. There were no buses at that hour, only dim lights and silence. She adjusted the cloth around her baby, trying to protect her from the wind. Hunger twisted in her stomach, but she ignored it. Her only worry was keeping the baby warm and quiet. As the sky slowly began to lighten, people started passing by. Some glanced at her and looked away. Others stared for a moment, then moved on. She felt exposed and ashamed, even though she had done nothing wrong. She wished she could disappear. When morning came, she stood up again. She knew she could not stay there. She walked toward a hospital nearby, hoping at least they would let her rest for a while. Inside, the smell of medicine filled the air. Nurses walked quickly past her. She sat in a corner, pretending she was waiting for someone. Hours passed. No one asked her questions, but no one helped either. Finally, a cleaner noticed her and told her she could not stay. She nodded and left without arguing. She had learned that asking too much only brought trouble. Outside, the sun was already high. The baby began to cry softly. She tried to feed her, turning away for privacy. Her hands shook from exhaustion. She had not slept at all. She thought about calling her parents, but her heart felt heavy. They had already made it clear that they could not go against her husband's family. She was on her own. Later that day, she found a small shelter run by volunteers. The building was old, but the people there spoke kindly. They gave her water and a simple meal. It was the first food she had eaten since the birth. Tears filled her eyes as she ate slowly, careful not to waste a single bite. They allowed her to stay for a few nights. The room was shared with other women, each carrying her own pain. At night, the sound of quiet crying filled the space. She listened and understood that she was not alone in her suffering. Days turned into weeks. She searched for work whenever she could, carrying the baby with her. Many places turned her away when they saw the child. Some people were polite. Others were not. She never argued. She simply thanked them and moved on. Eventually, she found small work washing dishes at a food stall. The pay was low, but it was something. The owner allowed her to keep the baby nearby as long as she stayed quiet. She worked long hours, her back aching, her hands rough from water and soap. At night, she returned to the shelter, tired but proud. She was earning on her own. It was not much, but it meant survival. The baby grew slowly. She began to open her eyes wider, following her mother's face. Sometimes she smiled in her sleep. Those moments gave her strength. When she felt like giving up, she looked at her daughter and remembered why she had to keep going. There were hard days. Days when money was not enough. Days when the baby was sick and she had to choose life became a slow, steady struggle for her and her little daughter. Each day began before the sun rose and ended long after it had set. She worked wherever she could find a small job, sometimes washing dishes, sometimes cleaning houses. Each coin she earned went to food, medicine, and whatever small comfort she could afford for her child. Despite the exhaustion, she never complained aloud, because her daughter's laughter and small milestones gave her the courage to continue. The baby grew quickly, learning to sit, crawl, and then walk. Each new word she spoke filled the mother with pride. She would repeat the words carefully, making sure she was always near to guide and protect her. In the evenings, when they had a few minutes of peace, they would sit outside the shelter, watching the sky change colors. She would tell stories of hope, imagining a world where people were kind and daughters were celebrated. Even as she worked, she kept learning. She read small books given by volunteers at the shelter and listened carefully to the advice of older women who had lived through hardship. She began to save money when she could, folding each coin carefully and hiding it in her small bag. Though it seemed like little, each coin was a step toward independence. She faced constant challenges. Sometimes the baby fell sick, and she had to choose between buying medicine or buying food. Many nights, she went to bed hungry so the child could eat. Hunger was one thing, but the fear of failing her daughter was another. Each day, she reminded herself that every small sacrifice would be worth it. Slowly, the community around her began to notice her efforts. The shopkeeper who first gave her work began to trust her more. Other small businesses started to allow her to take on short tasks. She never asked for favors, only for a chance to work. People admired her silent determination and the way she cared for her child despite everything. Her daughter became her companion in every small journey. Together, they would walk to the market, collect food, and return to their tiny shelter. The child learned quickly, copying the movements of her mother, helping where she could, and bringing smiles even in the hardest times. She became the mother's motivation to keep going when days seemed endless. As the years passed, the little girl grew into a bright, curious child. She loved listening to her mother's stories and often asked questions about the world. The mother encouraged her curiosity, teaching her to read and count, to notice the beauty in small things and to always be kind. She wanted her daughter to understand that their past hardships did not define them. There were moments of despair too. She often thought about the family that had thrown her out. She wondered if they ever regretted their decision. But she never let those thoughts stop her from moving forward. She had learned that looking backward too often would only slow her journey. Instead, she focused on the small joys, the child's first steps. Her first words, her laughter echoing through the shelter's small halls. Through all of this, she discovered a strength she did not know she had. She learned to carry burdens without letting them crush her spirit. She learned to find hope in small moments. Even when others doubted her, she trusted in herself. She understood that survival was not just about staying alive, but about creating a life worth living. One day, while walking through the marketplace, she realized how far she had come. She held her daughter's hand, feeling the warmth and security that had taken years to achieve. The streets that once seemed cold and threatening now felt like paths she could navigate with confidence. She had no home to return to, no family to protect her, but she had herself and her child. That was enough. At night, she would lie down with the child sleeping beside her. And for the first time in many years, she felt a sense of quiet pride. They had survived storms that could have broken anyone. They had endured hunger, fear, and rejection. Yet here they were, stronger and closer than ever. She whispered to her daughter that the world would soon recognize their worth, and that one day, no one would dare treat them as they had been treated. She did not know exactly how or when that day would come, but she believed it with all her heart. That belief carried her forward, step by step, day by day, till she and her daughter built a small world of their own within the harshness of life. And in that small world, filled with laughter, hope, and love, they began to heal. Preparing quietly for the moment when they could reclaim the life that had once been stolen from them. Years passed, and she and her daughter had built a small but stable life. They rented a modest room in a quiet part of town. She had a regular job that allowed her to pay bills and put food on the table. The daughter had grown into a bright and confident little girl, full of curiosity and laughter. Together, they had survived hardships that could have broken anyone. And they had done it with dignity and patience. One morning, as she prepared breakfast, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, but her heart tightened as she held it. The return address was from the family that had thrown her out years ago. She sat down slowly, the baby now a lively child playing at her feet. Unaware of the tension in her mother's hands, she opened the letter carefully. The words inside were awkward and hesitant. They spoke of regret and a desire to reconnect. They mentioned hardships they had faced since she had left and hinted at needing help. Her hands shook as she read. For a moment, old pain and anger surged inside her. Memories of being rejected, of nights spent in cold streets, of the endless struggle to keep her daughter safe, came rushing back. Her daughter. Noticing her mother's tension, climbed onto her lap. She did not understand fully, but she sensed the emotion. Her mother took a deep breath, calming herself. This was not a simple choice. It was not just about forgiving them. It was about understanding what had changed and deciding if they deserved a place in their lives. After a long day of thought, she decided to visit them. She did not feel like a victim anymore, but she knew that confronting the past required courage. She dressed carefully, holding her daughter's hand tightly. Together, they walked through the familiar streets, the same streets that once felt cold and threatening. Now, carrying memories of pain and resilience. When they arrived, she hesitated at the door. The house looked the same on the outside, yet strange to her now. She rang the bell, and moments later, a door opened. Faces that had once been filled with anger and disappointment now looked shocked and uncertain. The family recognized her instantly, though the years had changed them physically. The look in her eyes was different too. It was steady, calm, and full of quiet strength. The initial moments were filled with awkward silence. Words stumbled, apologies were made hesitantly, and explanations flowed unevenly. They spoke of regrets and hardships, of realizing that daughters were treasures, not burdens. But she listened silently. She did not rush to forgive. She simply allowed them to see the person she had become and the life she had built despite them. Her daughter stayed close, curious, and observant. She smiled at some small gestures, but she also maintained a quiet dignity that surprised the family. It was clear that the child was not afraid and had grown strong in ways they could not have imagined. As the conversation continued, the family began to notice her strength. She had survived everything they thought would break her. She had created a world of care and love for her daughter, something they had once dismissed as impossible. Their words became softer, their tone filled with a mix of awe and shame. She shared stories of the years they had been apart, of the nights they had gone hungry, of the small victories that kept them moving forward. She spoke without anger, but with clarity, making it impossible for them to ignore the truth. They realized that the child they had once dismissed was now the reason for the woman's strength, and they could not help but see the consequences of their past cruelty. The visit lasted hours, and by the end, the family was silent, processing what they had witnessed. They had expected weakness, tears, and perhaps a plea for acceptance. Instead, they saw resilience, love, and dignity. The child, with her bright eyes and gentle manners, had already begun to challenge the old beliefs that had caused so much pain. She left that day with a calm sense of closure. She did not need immediate forgiveness or reconciliation. What mattered was that they had seen who she had become and the life she had built. She had returned not as someone broken, but as someone strong, someone who had not allowed cruelty to define her. Walking back home, hand in hand with her daughter, she felt a lightness she had not known in years. The streets were no longer threatening. Each step felt like a small victory, a reminder that they had endured and grown. She whispered to her daughter that one day, people would understand the value of daughters, that love and respect could change hearts even when it seemed impossible. Her daughter listened, eyes shining, and held her hand tighter. Together, they walked forward, leaving the past behind them while carrying its lessons. The return had changed everything, not because the family had apologized, but because they had finally seen the truth of their actions. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the future they would build together was stronger than any pain the past had caused. Between medicine and food, she learned to stretch every coin. She learned to be strong in ways she never imagined. One evening, while returning from work, she sat on the steps outside the shelter and watched the sky turn orange. For the first time since that night, she felt something new. It was not happiness, but it was close. It was hope. She realized that even though she had been thrown out, she was still standing. She had lost her home, but she had not lost herself. And the little girl in her arms was not a burden. She was the reason her mother woke up every day and kept moving forward. That night, as the baby slept peacefully, she whispered a promise. Life would not always be this hard. One day, they would have a place of their own. One day, no one would ever make her daughter feel unwanted again. She did not know how or when, but deep inside she believed it would happen. And that belief was enough to carry her into the next day. Years passed, and she and her daughter had built a small but stable life. They rented a modest room in a quiet part of town. She had a regular job that allowed her to pay bills and put food on the table. The daughter had grown into a bright and confident little girl, full of curiosity and laughter. Together, they had survived hardships that could have broken anyone, and they had done it with dignity and patience. One morning, as she prepared breakfast, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, but her heart tightened as she held it. The return address was from the family that had thrown her out years ago. She sat down slowly, the baby now a lively child playing at her feet. Unaware of the tension in her mother's hands, she opened the letter carefully. The words inside were awkward and hesitant. They spoke of regret and a desire to reconnect. They mentioned hardships they had faced since she had left and hinted at needing help. Her hands shook as she read. For a moment, old pain and anger surged inside her. Memories of being rejected, of nights spent in cold streets, of the endless struggle to keep her daughter safe, came rushing back. Her daughter, noticing her mother's tension, climbed onto her lap. She did not understand fully, but she sensed the emotion. Her mother took a deep breath, calming herself. This was not a simple choice. It was not just about forgiving them. It was about understanding what had changed and deciding if they deserved a place in their lives. After a long day of thought, she decided to visit them. She did not feel like a victim anymore, but she knew that confronting the past required courage. She dressed carefully, holding her daughter's hand tightly. Together, they walked through the familiar streets, the same streets that once felt cold and threatening, now carrying memories of pain and resilience. When they arrived, she hesitated at the door. The house looked the same on the outside, yet strange to her now. She rang the bell, and moments later, a door opened. Faces that had once been filled with anger and disappointment now looked shocked and uncertain. The family recognized her instantly, though the years had changed them physically. The look in her eyes was different too. It was steady, calm, and full of quiet strength. The initial moments were filled with awkward silence. Words stumbled, apologies were made hesitantly, and explanations flowed unevenly. They spoke of regrets and hardships, of realizing that daughters were treasures, not burdens. But she listened silently. She did not rush to forgive. She simply allowed them to see the person she had become and the life she had built despite them. Her daughter stayed close, curious and observant. She smiled at some small gestures, but she also maintained a quiet dignity that surprised the family. It was clear that the child was not afraid and had grown strong in ways they could not have imagined. As the conversation continued, the family began to notice her strength. She had survived everything they thought would break her. She had created a world of care and love for her daughter, something they had once dismissed as impossible. Their words became softer, their tone filled with a mix of awe and shame. She shared stories of the years they had been apart, of the nights they had gone hungry, of the small victories that kept them moving forward. She spoke without anger, but with clarity, making it impossible for them to ignore the truth. They realized that the child they had once dismissed was now the reason for the woman's strength, and they could not help but see the consequences of their past cruelty. The visit lasted hours, and by the end, the family was silent, processing what they had witnessed. They had expected weakness, tears, and perhaps a plea for acceptance. Instead, they saw resilience, love, and dignity. The child, with her bright eyes and gentle manners, had already begun to challenge the old beliefs that had caused so much pain. She left that day with a calm sense of closure. She did not need immediate forgiveness or reconciliation. What mattered was that they had seen who she had become and the life she had built. She had returned not as someone broken, but as someone strong, someone who had not allowed cruelty to define her. Walking back home, hand in hand with her daughter, she felt a lightness she had not known in years. The streets were no longer threatening. Each step felt like a small victory, a reminder that they had endured and grown. She whispered to her daughter that one day, people would understand the value of daughters, that love and respect could change hearts even when it seemed impossible. Her daughter listened, eyes shining, and held her hand tighter. Together, they walked forward, leaving the past behind them while carrying its lessons. The return had changed everything, not because the family had apologized, but because they had finally seen the truth of their actions. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the future they would build together was stronger than any pain the past had caused. After the visit to the family that had once thrown her out, life took on a new rhythm. She no longer carried the same fear or uncertainty that had once shadowed her days. Each morning, she woke with a quiet determination, knowing that the past no longer had the power to control her. Her daughter had grown into a bright, confident young girl whose laughter and curiosity had become the heartbeat of their small home. Word spread quietly in their community about the woman who had survived unimaginable hardships and had built a life full of dignity and strength. People who once doubted her now looked at her with respect. Small opportunities that had once seemed impossible began to appear. She found work that paid steadily, allowing her to provide better food, clothes, and books for her daughter. She could see the little girl's eyes light up with excitement as she learned new words, solved small problems, and explored the world around her. One afternoon, a neighbor approached her with a proposition. A small space had become available for a new business, and they encouraged her to take it. She hesitated at first, unsure if she could manage it alongside her responsibilities. But when she saw her daughter watching her, eyes full of trust and hope, she realized that this was the next step. With careful planning, she rented the space and began setting up a small shop. It was humble, but it was hers. It's a place where she could finally stand on her own completely. The shop became more than just a source of income. It was a symbol of her journey. People from the neighborhood came not only to buy goods but also to hear her story, to witness the quiet resilience that had carried her and her daughter through years of hardship. Her daughter often accompanied her, helping with small tasks, learning responsibility, and observing her mother's interactions with kindness and patience. Meanwhile, the family she had returned to continued to watch her from afar. They saw the woman they had once dismissed now thriving, and they realized the depth of their past mistakes. Slowly, they attempted to make amends, sending small gestures of goodwill. She accepted some, not out of weakness, but as a way to demonstrate that the past no longer dictated her life. Forgiveness was not instant, but the act of being seen and acknowledged by them marked a turning point. Her daughter, growing wiser each day, began to understand the meaning of resilience and compassion. She learned that life could be unfair, but it could also be beautiful if one had the courage to move forward. Together, mother and daughter spent evenings planning for the future, dreaming of a life that was no longer dictated by fear or rejection. They imagined bigger spaces, more learning, and eventually helping others who faced similar hardships. One day, an unexpected opportunity arose. A local charity approached her, inviting her to share her story with other women who had been through difficult circumstances. She hesitated, wondering if she wanted to relive the pain. She agreed, thinking of the daughter watching her with admiration. Standing before a small audience, she recounted the years of struggle, the nights on the streets, and the long journey of survival. She spoke not of bitterness, but of hope, resilience, the power of never giving up. The audience listened in silence, many with tears in their eyes. Women who had faced their own challenges found inspiration in her story. They asked questions, sought advice, and shared their own experiences. For the first time, she felt that the pain of the past had transformed into something meaningful, a lesson for others, a guide for those who still struggled. At home, life continued to improve steadily. The shop became well known, her daughter excelled in school, and their small apartment became a place filled with warmth, laughter, and hope. They no longer feared the past because they had learned to live in the present, to find joy in small achievements, and to nurture a future that was theirs to create. Then came the day when the family who had once rejected her visited again. This time, it was not awkward or tense. They had come to apologize sincerely and to witness the life she had built. She welcomed them calmly, not out of weakness, but to show that she had grown beyond the pain they had caused. They saw the thriving child, the confident woman, and realized that their old beliefs were wrong. They had tried to hold her down, but she had risen higher than they could have imagined. In that moment, something shifted. Forgiveness was not about them anymore. It was about her freedom and peace. She spoke gently, acknowledging the change, and the family listened. They understood perhaps for the first time, that their actions had consequences, but that healing was possible if one chose it. Walking back home with her daughter, hand in hand, she felt a deep sense of completion. The years of struggle, the nights of fear, the moments of despair, all of it had shaped them, but none of it had broken them. She whispered to her daughter about the future, about hope, about the strength of daughters and mothers alike. The little girl smiled, understanding in her own simple way that they had survived and thrived against all odds. The story ended not with revenge or resentment, but with dignity, love, and the quiet power of perseverance. The woman had shown that even when life is unfair, even when cruelty is present, one can rise, protect their loved ones, and change the course of their destiny. And the daughter, now growing into a capable, kind, and confident young girl, was the living proof that no one should ever underestimate the strength of a girl and a mother who refuses to give up. Years passed, and life continued to grow in small, meaningful ways. The mother and daughter had settled into a routine filled with work, learning, and small joys. The shop had expanded, and the neighborhood began to recognize her as someone who had overcome the impossible. People often came by not only to buy goods but to share stories, seek advice, or simply find comfort in her calm and resilient presence. Her daughter had grown into a capable young girl, curious and compassionate. She spent hours helping her mother at the shop, organizing items and assisting customers. But she also studied diligently, asking questions about the world and imagining possibilities beyond their small neighborhood. Her mother encouraged her, teaching her to dream without fear and to respect others regardless of their circumstances. One morning, as the mother opened the shop, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was someone from the charity organization that had invited her years ago to share her story. They had a new initiative, a program to help women who had faced hardship start their own businesses. They remembered her as an inspiring figure and wanted her to lead the new program. She hesitated at first, thinking about the responsibilities and the time it would take away from her daughter and her shop. But her daughter looked up at her with bright eyes, silently encouraging her to take the opportunity. The mother accepted, knowing that this could be another way to turn her experiences into something positive for others. She began training other women, sharing her story, teaching practical skills, and offering guidance on resilience and independence. The women listened intently, some with tears in their eyes, others with determination. She reminded them that their pasts did not define them, that even when life seemed cruel, they could rise with patience, courage, and hope. Seeing the growth and progress in these women brought her a new sense of purpose and fulfillment. Meanwhile, her daughter continued to excel. Teachers praised her diligence and kindness, and neighbors admired the balance of her independence and humility. She had inherited her mother's strength and empathy, and together, they became a symbol of resilience in the community. People who had once doubted them now sought guidance from them, asking how they managed to survive and thrive despite adversity. The family that had once rejected them remained in touch, cautiously at first. Over time, they became observers of her success and her ability to nurture her daughter. They still carried guilt and shame for their past actions, but they also began to respect the woman and the child they had once dismissed. The mother did not demand affection or forgiveness, but she allowed interactions that reflected mutual understanding. This created a bridge that had been impossible years ago. A bridge built not on obligation, but on acknowledgement and growth. She also found time to give back to her neighborhood. Small acts of kindness, mentorship, and guidance to young girls became part of her routine. She believed that no one should face the kind of struggles she and her daughter had endured alone. These efforts created a ripple effect, inspiring other women and children to pursue education, work opportunities, and self-respect. Slowly, the neighborhood transformed into a community where daughters were valued and women supported each other. Her daughter, now older, began to understand the depth of her mother's sacrifices. She realized that every small struggle, every long night, every moment of doubt had been a step toward building the life they now enjoyed. She often asked questions, wanting to know about the nights on the streets, the meals she had gone without, and the courage it took to stand up to a world that had not been kind. The mother answered honestly, without bitterness, teaching her daughter resilience and the importance of hope. One evening, as they walked home together after a long day at the shop, her daughter asked, "Mother, do you ever feel scared again?" She smiled gently, looking at the girl whose laughter had carried her through so many nights. "Fear comes sometimes," she said, "but it no longer controls me. We have learned that we can face challenges and grow stronger. Life is not always easy, but we can choose how we respond to it." The daughter nodded, understanding more than words could convey. Together, they continued walking hand in hand, through streets that had once felt cold and threatening, but now felt familiar, safe, and full of possibilities. Each step was a reminder of the journey they had traveled, from rejection and fear to strength, hope, and love. Life continued to unfold with both challenges and small victories. The mother and daughter had grown stronger, but they knew that growth required constant effort and courage. Their days were filled with work, learning, and caring for each other, but also with small moments of joy that reminded them how far they had come. The shop, which had started as a modest space, was now thriving. Customers came regularly, not only for the goods, but for the warmth and kindness the mother and daughter shared. They remembered her story, admired her strength, and often brought friends and family to meet them. Her daughter had taken on more responsibilities, learning about business, interacting with customers, and managing small details. These experiences were teaching her lessons in independence, resilience, and empathy that no school could provide. One morning, a young girl entered the shop with her mother. The girl's eyes were wide and curious, but there was a sadness behind them. The mother noticed immediately and smiled gently, remembering the days she herself had faced uncertainty and fear. She invited the girl to sit and offered her a small treat, quietly reassuring her with kindness. The mother realized that her journey had given her the ability to recognize pain and respond with compassion, and she understood that she could now extend that support to others. Over the next weeks, she helped the young girl and her mother in small ways, offering advice, connecting them with local resources, and teaching the girl small skills. It was a reminder that her experiences, though painful, had prepared her to make a difference in the lives of others. Her daughter watched closely, learning that kindness was a strength as much as resilience. Meanwhile, the mother began to see the impact of her past story on the wider community. Women who had once been isolated or struggling sought her out, inspired by her life and determined to follow her example. She formed informal groups where women could share experiences, learn new skills, and support each other. Her shop became a hub, not just for commerce, but for hope, learning, and connection. Despite the successes, life still brought moments of challenge. Sometimes resources were scarce or unexpected problems arose in the shop. There were days when she doubted whether she could handle everything at once. But each time she remembered the nights spent on the streets, the hunger she and her daughter had endured, and the moments when survival itself had felt impossible. Those memories fueled her strength, reminding her that she could handle whatever came her way now. Her daughter continued to flourish, learning both practical and moral lessons from her mother. She understood the importance of empathy, hard work, and courage. She also developed her own ideas, suggesting improvements in the shop and offering advice to her mother. This partnership became a bond that strengthened both of them, teaching them the value of cooperation, patience, and trust. One day, a local school invited the mother to speak about her life and experiences. She hesitated at first, unsure if she could share her story in a way that would be helpful. But with her daughter encouraging her, she accepted. In front of a group of students, she spoke calmly and honestly about the hardships she had faced, the years of struggle, and the strength it had taken to keep moving forward. She emphasized that obstacles could be overcome with courage, persistence, and compassion, and that no one's value was determined by others' opinions. The students listened intently, many with tears in their eyes, others with renewed determination. She answered their questions with patience, helping them see that even in the most difficult circumstances, there was a path forward. Her daughter watched from the side, proud and inspired by her mother's ability to turn pain into guidance for others. At home, the evenings were spent reflecting on the day and planning for the future. They discussed how to expand the shop further, how to support more women and children in the community, and how to ensure that their own lives continued to grow with purpose and joy. These conversations strengthened their bond and helped them feel that, despite the past, their future was bright and full of possibilities. The family that had once rejected them continued to observe from a distance. Over time, they became more involved, cautiously offering assistance and expressing genuine admiration for the life the mother and daughter had built. There was no rush to erase the past, but a slow and steady acknowledgement of their mistakes. This careful rebuilding of trust allowed the mother to teach her daughter an important lesson about the balance, self-respect, and personal boundaries. Through all of this, the mother and daughter remained committed to helping others, understanding that their journey had given them insight that could change lives. They mentored young girls, guided struggling families, and shared their experiences with anyone willing to listen. The community began to see them not just as survivors, but as leaders and examples of what determination, love, and resilience could achieve. Even as challenges arose, they faced each one with calm and determination. Every obstacle became an opportunity to teach, to learn, and to grow stronger together. The mother often reminded her daughter that life was not about avoiding pain, but about facing it with courage and finding meaning in every experience. And the daughter, inspired by the example before her, embraced these lessons, becoming a young girl capable of compassion, leadership, and courage beyond her years. Through these years, their lives continued to weave a story of perseverance, hope, and transformation. The mother knew that the struggles of the past had shaped them, but they no longer defined them. Together, she and her daughter had created a life of dignity, love, and influence. They had turned every hardship into a lesson, every challenge into an opportunity, and every moment of despair into a chance for growth. In the quiet moments, she would reflect on the journey they had traveled, from being thrown out for giving birth to a daughter, to becoming a symbol of strength and hope in the community. She realized that their story was not only about survival, but about the power of compassion, the importance of resilience, and the way one life could inspire and uplift countless others. And as she held her daughter's hand, watching her smile and grow into her own person, she knew that their story was only beginning, with endless possibilities waiting just ahead. As time went on, the mother and daughter became mentors, role models, and leaders in their community. They celebrated small victories, guided others through challenges, and nurtured the next generation of resilient children. Their story became a living example that even the deepest pain could lead to growth, compassion, and achievement. The mother often reflected on the journey from being thrown out for giving birth to a daughter, to building a life full of respect, opportunity, and love. She realized that every hardship, every sacrifice, and every sleepless night had been worth it, because it had shaped not only her life, but also her daughter's, and the lives of others she touched along the way. Together, they had transformed tragedy into triumph, proving that courage, love, and resilience could change everything.